In the heart of the Galactic Commons, on the magnificent station known as the Spire of Celestial Accord, hope was a currency traded in whispers. For generations, the galaxy had flourished, a tapestry of 1,000 species, woven together by hyperlanes and shared knowledge. The Varel, with their crystalline minds, composed symphonies that could calm stellar storms. The Ctharn, bioluminescent leviathans of the gas seas, taught philosophy in pulses of gentle light. The fierce but honorable Grat, with hides of living stone, built wonders that defied gravity. And then, the silent came. They were not a species. They were an absence. A creeping, devouring null field that swallowed star systems not in fire, but in utter soundless erasure. Planets didn't explode, they simply ceased to be coherent. Matter unraveled. Energy dissipated. The greatest minds of the Commons fought with gravity manipulation, with energy shields, with psychic harmonic dampeners. All failed. The silent advanced, an incoming tide of nothingness. In desperation, the Commons enacted the Edict of Final Recourse. All member species would send their greatest surviving minds, their most vital cultural archives, and their last best hope to the Spire. Here they would combine their genius to design an ark, a vessel capable of fleeing the galaxy itself, of preserving a seed of all they were. It was a beautiful, desperate dream. A starship of impossible scale and complexity. And into this gathering of galactic elites came humanity. We were the newest members. Our invitation was a formality, a courtesy extended to a young, plucky species on the galactic periphery. They knew of us. We were the ones who augmented ourselves. While other species evolved wings, or photosynthesis, or telepathy, we built them. We were not seen as visionary. We were seen as crude, limited, trapped in what the Varel called the prison of the unmetaphored flesh. They saw our mechanical limbs not as marvels of neural integration, but as pitiful crutches. They heard the whir of our actuators and called it a song of lack. They watched us interface with machines through physical ports and tactile interfaces, and they pitted us. How lonely, they thought, to not be able to merge with the data stream through thought alone. How tragic, to need a tool to lift what the Grat could lift with innate strength. When our delegation arrived on the Spire, a mix of engineers, exosuit specialists, and theoretical physicists, the laughter wasn't loud. It was polite. It was in the way the Varel would gently correct our proposed equations with a wave of a luminous hand. It was in the way the Grat foreman would sigh, a sound like grinding pebbles, before moving a multi-ton generator block we were struggling to calibrate. They called us the grafted. The clockwork children. Our lead engineer, Dr. Eris Thorne, a woman with a composite polymer arm and a retinal display that flickered as she worked, was treated with a kind of condescending patience. They appreciated our enthusiasm. Our mechanical ingenuity, on a small scale. But for the task of building salvation? For weaving the technologies of 100 species into a single flawless whole? We were relegated. Fetching tools. Running diagnostics on subsystems others designed. Doing the simple physical labor. The Ark's design was finalized without our substantive input. A glittering, organic-looking vessel, its hull grown from Ctharn coral metal, its navigation a Varel psychic lattice, its engines a Grat gravitational fold drive. It was a masterpiece. And it sat, 95% complete, in the central construction bay of the Spire, silent. Immobile. A tomb before its time. For in their beautiful biological and psionic harmony, they had encountered a problem so mundane, so physical, that their greatest minds could not conceive of a solution. The Ark was too heavy. Not too heavy for the engines. The Grat drive could move continents. Too heavy for the Spire's construction bay. The delicate gravity calibration plates, designed to hold the ship for final integration, were buckling. The very station that housed the last hope of the galaxy was groaning under its weight. Transferring the Ark to a dedicated launch cradle required moving it up. Just 50 meters of vertical lift, from the bay floor to the launch alignment clamps. A trivial distance. But to move it, they needed to apply force to its hull. And the hull, a living Ctharn metal coral, was psychoreactive. Direct tractor beams caused traumatic feedback loops in the Varel operators. Physical contact from the Grat's gravity manipulators, if misaligned by a micrometer, caused the coral to shriek in psychic agony, threatening to crack. It was a perfect, tragic paradox. Their ship was so advanced, so exquisitely integrated with their own biology and minds, that they could not touch it without harming it or themselves. Salvation was built. And it was stuck. Varel Architect, the harmony is fracturing. The strain patterns are spreading through the station's superstructure. We have, perhaps 70 of your hours before the bay integrity fails. Grat Foreman, we cannot push. We cannot pull. Our strength is useless. Our technology is too blunt. Ktharn Ambassador, the song of being within the hull. It is a song of pain. We cannot ask it to endure more. The council chamber fell into a desolate silence. The brilliant, beautiful beings who could fold space and sing stars to sleep were defeated by a simple lifting problem. And in the back of the chamber, at the observer's bench, Dr. Eris Thorne stood up. The eyes and sensory orbs and psychic foci of the galaxy's last best turned to her. There was no expectation in their gaze. Only a vague, polite curiosity. And beneath that, a well-hidden current of irritation. What could the grafted one possibly contribute now? Eris did not have the graceful presence of the Varel. Her movements were precise, intentional, punctuated by the soft servo whine of her augmentations. She walked to the central holographic display, the light playing off the matte gray polymer of her arm. Eris Thorne, the problem is one of interface. Your technologies are extensions of yourselves. Beautiful. Sensitive. The ship is essentially a part of your collective nervous system. Applying macroforce to it is like trying to move a limb by hitting it with a rock. The Varel Architect pulsed with muted agreement. Yes, yes, child. We have established this. Eris continued, her retinal display flickering as she pulled up schematics. You've been trying to solve this with your paradigm. More refined tractor beams. More precise gravity nudges. You're trying to perform microsurgery with sledgehammers because they are the only tools your physiology can hold. The Grat Foreman rumbled, a defensive tone in his voice. You speak of tools. We have the finest tools in the galaxy. You do, Eris agreed, nodding. But you lack the hands. She let that word hang in the air. You lack a means of translation. Between the infinitely delicate and the physically powerful. You need an intermediary. A buffer. She gestured, and her own mechanical hand flexed, fingers spreading with a faint, precise sound. You see this as a limitation. A replacement for something lost. We see it as something else. A bridge. This arm does not feel pain. It does not suffer psychic feedback. It can receive a digital command to apply 50.3 newtons of force to a specific square millimeter, and it will do so, exactly. Tirelessly. It is a tool that is part of me, yet separate enough to be sacrificed if necessary. The Ktharn Ambassador pulsed with a confused, gentle light. You propose grafting your mechanical parts onto the Ark? This is not a solution. It is a desecration. A soft murmur, the galactic version of a scoff, went through the chamber. Eris didn't flinch. She had spent a lifetime facing this look. The look that saw the machinery before the mind. The look that called her courage compensation, and her perseverance obsession. Eris, no. Not grafting. We propose cradling. Her display projected a new schematic over the Arkansas. It was not beautiful. It was brutally, starkly functional. A latticework of carbon nanotube struts, shock-absorbent hydraulic actuators, and millions of tiny intelligent contact pads. It looked like a giant, mechanical, loving hand. Eris, a lifting cradle. But not one operated by remote control. One that is worn. The silence now was different. Not polite, but bewildered. Grat Foreman, worn? By whom? The strain would pulp even our bodies. Eris, not by one being. Not even by 100. She took a deep breath. This was the moment. We have been monitoring the structural stress profiles. We have analyzed the hull's psychoreactive resonant frequency. We have catalogued every microfracture in the bay's gravity plates. For months, while we fetched your tools and ran your diagnostics, we have been running our own. We have a solution. But it requires every able-bodied human on the spire. And it requires you to trust us with your Arkansas. The uproar was immediate, a symphony of outrage. Varel Architect, psychic voice sharp with alarm, you would have your clockwork army manhandle our last hope? The delicate harmonies would be shattered. The hull song would die. Ctharn Ambassador, flashing a pained, dark blue, it is a thing of life. You treat it as cargo. Eris, raising her voice, the first time she'd done so, a human sound sharp and angular in the chamber, you treat it as a fetish. The silence returned, shocked and icy. Eris, softer, but no less intense, you are so in awe of what you've created, so afraid of marring its perfection, that you would let it, and all of you, die. You worship the song, but you have forgotten the purpose of the singer. The purpose is to survive. To carry the song forward. Even if the voice is scratched. Even if the instrument is dented. She pointed at the schematic of the brutal, beautiful cradle. This is not a claw. It is a hymn. A hymn written in load-bearing calculations and hydraulic pressure. Every actuator is a note. Every strut is a bar of music. We will not manhandle your Arkansas. We will lift it. With a tenderness no psychic hand can match, because our tenderness is born of absolute control. We will make our mechanical bodies the barrier between your dream and the crushing reality of gravity. We will bear the strain so the ship doesn't have to. The council deliberated. It was not a debate of merit, but one of necessity. The station groaned again, a long terrifying sound that vibrated through the very bones of the spire. Time had run out. It was the human plan, or it was oblivion. Reluctantly, fearfully, they agreed. The construction of the cradle was an offense to the senses of the commons. It was loud. It was dirty. It threw sparks and the smell of ozone and hot metal. The aliens watched from clean, sterile galleries above, their forms radiating anxiety and disdain. They saw humans crawling over the growing structure like insects, shouting instructions in their short, barking language, interfacing with machines via handheld pads and physical cables. It seemed so primitive. So disconnected. They whispered. Look at them. They cannot even merge with their own tools. They must command them, like beasts. They are treating the sacred ark like a broken ground vehicle. This will end in a cataclysm of metal and shame. Dr. Thorne moved through the chaos like a conductor. Her mechanical arm plugged directly into fabrication units, her mind processing a dozen data streams at once through her neural link. She didn't look graceful. She looked efficient. A part of the machine she was building. One of the Varel observers, unable to bear it, psychically projected a thought to her, a mix of pity and scorn. You are so separate. So alone in your shells of metal. Do you not yearn for the true connection? Eris paused, looking up at the crystalline being. She wiped sweat from her forehead with her biological hand, leaving a smudge of grime. Eris, connection? You feel the ship's pain. It paralyzes you. We feel the strain in the servos. The heat in the actuators. The feedback in the hydraulics. We listen to the song of the machine. And that song tells us what to do. Not with empathy, but with data. And right now, data is what will save all of us. She turned back to her work. The Varel recoiled, not understanding. To them, it was a confession of spiritual poverty. But the cradle took shape. A titanic, geometric exoskeleton, settling slowly, carefully around the gleaming organic form of the Arkansas. It was like seeing a dinosaur skeleton embrace a butterfly. The hour was upon them. Across the spire, in docking bays and habitation modules, 147 humans suited up. This was not the donning of ceremonial robes. This was the armoring for a battle against physics itself. They climbed into reinforced interface couches, not unlike the command chairs of ancient submarines. Neural jacks were plugged in. Exo-frame harnesses locked with a series of heavy clunks. Haptic feedback suits tightened. Each human became a node in a vast, distributed network. The cradle mind, they called it. On the main bay deck, Eris Thorne sat in the primary nexus. Her station was a jungle of hardline connections and holographic feeds. Her mechanical limbs were plugged directly into the control console. She was the focal point. The conductor. Above, in the gallery, the entire Galactic Commons watched. A sea of fearful, doubting faces. Grat Foreman, 147. It is a laughable number. The gravitational counterforce required would need the combined psychic might of thousands of Varel, or the innate strength of 100 Grat. Their fragile bodies will be vaporized by the feedback. Varel architect, they are already broken. They merely do not know it. Let us hope their failure does not crack the station core. Eris's voice, calm and amplified, echoed through the bay. Cradle mind, initiate neural handshake. Protocol, gentle giant. In their couches, across the station, the humans closed their eyes. Their individual senses receded. They did not merge telepathically. They networked. Data became a shared river. Eris felt the pressure on Cradle Strut A7 as if it were her own spine. Engineer Chun, 3 decks away, felt the temperature of Hydraulic Line K9 as if it were his own blood. Pilot Vance, in the distant starboard docking wing, saw the strain gauge on the ARC's port bow as clearly as if it were her own heartbeat. They were not one mind. They were a chorus. A chorus speaking in the language of stress tolerances, torque vectors, and distributed load. Lift sequence initiated. Primary engagement on my mark, Eris said, her voice now just a whisper, her consciousness mostly in the machine. 3, 2, 1. Mark. But there was no psychic scream of pain. The Cradle's millions of contact pads were not just pushing, they were dynamically adjusting, mimicking the exact contour of the hull, spreading the load across its entire surface like a million loving fingers finding the perfect hold. Strain nominal. Hull resonance stable. No feedback spikes, Eris reported, her voice monotone, a byproduct of deep interface. Lifting. 5 centimeters. 10. The arc was rising. Imperceptibly slow. Maddeningly steady. The aliens watched, their disdain slowly freezing into disbelief. There was no violent spectacle.
No dramatic straining.
Just the slow, inexorable ascent of a mountain, cradled in a web of silent, purposeful metal. Then, the first crisis. Cradle Strut D12, near the stern, had failed. A microfracture from earlier station stresses, missed in the scan. A catastrophic point of failure. On the holographic display, a section of the schematic flashed red. The force distribution was suddenly unbalanced. The arc tilted, a bare fraction of a degree. In the gallery, there was a unified gasp. The Grat foreman surged forward. It is over. The asymmetry will tear the hull apart. But in the Cradle mind, there was no panic. There was recalculation. Engineer Chun, whose node was linked to that sector, didn't cry out. He diverted. His consciousness, through the network, triggered a cascade of compensations. Adjacent struts stiffened. Hydraulic pressure was rerouted through secondary lines in milliseconds. The humans operating those nodes felt a sudden searing phantom pain, a haptic feedback simulation of immense strain, as their systems took on the extra load. They gritted their teeth. They bore it. The arc's tilt corrected. The ascent continued, without a pause. Eris, voice strained, a human sound breaking through the machine monotone load redistributed. Compensating. Continue lift. 20 centimeters. The Varel architect was trembling. It had felt the shift in forces, the violent rebalancing that should have sent psychic shockwaves through the ship. It had felt nothing. The ship was calm. The humans, in their machines, had absorbed all the violence. They had contained the chaos. Then, the second crisis. Worse. A whole section of the bay's support was giving way. The Cradle and the Ark were about to drop 3 meters onto crumbling infrastructure. A drop that would shatter the coral hull, no matter how gentle the Cradle. The aliens despaired. This was it. The final, physical betrayal of the universe. But Eris Thorne's eyes snapped open. They were not the eyes of a woman connected to a machine. They were the eyes of a woman who was the machine. And she saw a path. A crazy, brutal, beautiful path. Cradle mind. Listen to me. Her voice was a roar through the neural link. We are not setting it down. We are throwing it. The thought echoed across 147 linked minds. They understood instantly. The plan formed in the space between synaptic pulses. Redirect all power from dampeners to primary actuators. On my coordinate. We have one shot. We push it up to the clamps. We don't place it, we launch it the last 20 meters. It was insane. It required applying a massive sudden acceleration without the gentleness that had defined the entire lift. It risked everything. But to stay was to die. All nodes. Maximum thrust vector on my mark. Channel the pain. Channel the strain. This is not a lift anymore. This is a catch. In their couches, across the spire, the humans screamed. Not screams of fear. Screams of effort. The haptic feedback was no longer simulation. Their systems were overloading, sending real heat, real stress warnings through their bodies. They felt their metal bones straining. They felt the phantom weight of a starship on their collective shoulders. Some lost consciousness from the neural load. Their nodes went dark, and the remaining minds shouldered the burden, the network dynamically rerouting around the fallen. Eris was at the center of the storm. Her biological eye was bloodshot. Her mechanical arm smoked at the joint where it was plugged in. She was bleeding from her nose. But she was smiling. A fierce, terrible, human smile.
Now.
The silence was absolute. Dust drifted in the Great Bay. The aliens in the gallery stared, their sensory organs overwhelmed. The cradle was still. Its actuators were dead, smoking, many sheared off entirely. It had spent itself in one final heroic act. And the Ark. The Ark was nestled. Perfectly, seamlessly, in the upper launch alignment clamps. 50 meters above the broken, ruined bay floor. It hadn't been placed. It had been caught by the clamps, its momentum perfectly calculated, its trajectory flawless. The humans had thrown the last hope of the galaxy, like a quarterback throwing a perfect pass. And they had not missed. One by one, across the station, the human nodes went offline. The cradle mind dissolved. In its place was a chorus of ragged breathing, of pained groans, of soft sobbing laughter over comms. On the main deck, Eris Thorne unplugged. Her mechanical arm hung useless, its actuators burned out. She used her biological arm to push herself up, swaying on her feet. She looked up at the Ark, gleaming and safe, then turned to the gallery. The aliens were not just quiet. They were transformed. The Varel architect was crystalline, but from its form slow luminescent tears were falling, a thing never before recorded in their species. It had felt the final furious, controlled burst of will from the human network. It wasn't psychic. It was something else. Something more focused, more directed. A will forged in the friction between mind and machine, between desire and physical limit. It wasn't a song. It was a battle cry made manifest in mathematics and steel. The Grat foreman had fallen to his knees, the stone of his hide grinding against the floor. He had spent his life understanding strength. He had never understood strength like this. Strength that could be so precisely measured, so perfectly distributed, and then at the critical moment, so explosively, self-destructively unleashed. They had not just lifted a ship. They had defied a law of the universe through sheer, coordinated, mechanical will. The Ktharn ambassador was glowing a soft, pulsing gold, a color of awe, of profound, humbling gratitude. The ship's song was not just intact, it was triumphant. And it sang of new harmonies. The harmony of clanking metal and human breath. The harmony of the bridge between the delicate dream and the hard reality. They had seen it. They had finally seen it. The mechanical bodies were not prisons. They were instruments. The interfaces were not limitations. They were declarations. Humanity did not seek to become one with the universe through thought or biology. They sought to converse with it. To argue with it. To take the laws of physics as suggestions and then build a new tool to bend them. They didn't lift with their minds. They didn't lift with innate strength. They designed a new kind of strength. They became the lift. Eris Arc is secured. Launch clamps report full engagement. The pathway is clear. She took a staggering step forward, looked up at the gallery, and gave a simple human nod. Then her legs gave out. They did not hover over her with pity. The Grat foreman gently, with a reverence he usually reserved for sacred stones, lifted her. His touch was infinitely careful. The Varel architect extended a crystalline filament, not to probe, but to gently stabilize her neural patterns, soothing the feedback burns. The Ktharn enveloped her in a gentle warm light that eased the physical pain. Around the spire, the other humans were being tended to with the same reverence. The grafted were now being called something else. A new word formed in the Commons lexicon, a synthesis of their languages. It translated roughly to, the bridge builders. The willful hand. Later, in the healing ward, the council stood before Eris's recovery pod. The Ark was preparing for its exodus, its systems humming with life that would now continue, because of a crude solution. The Varel architect spoke, its psychic voice humbled, awed. We saw only the machine. We called it a cage. We did not see the will inside. You do not use your tools, Dr. Thorne. You extend your will through them. You argue with reality, and you win. The Grat foreman placed a heavy stone hand on the transparent pod. You have a strength we do not. The strength to reshape your own bodies to meet the challenge. You do not wait to evolve. You decide to evolve. Today, you evolved to lift a star. Eris, her biological hand resting on the pod's interior, smiled weakly. We just used the right tools for the job. The Ktharn pulsed gently. No. You showed us that the mind is not just for dreaming of starships. It is also for building the hands that lift them. You are not separate from your technology. You are its soul. And we have been singing to the stars, while you have been learning to carry them. As the Ark departed the spire, a glittering seed fleeing the silent, it did not just carry the biological and psychic legacy of the galaxy. In its central core, integrated now with equal status alongside the Varel lattice and the Grat drive, was a new system. A brute force, beautifully pragmatic backup. A manual, mechanical override. Designed by humans. And the Galactic Commons, watching the Ark jump into the void, finally understood. Humanity's true power was not in spite of our mechanical bodies. It was because of them. Because we see no divide between the flesh and the forged. Because our courage is not an ethereal thing, it is something we weld into girders, code into software, and stamp into steel. We look at a mountain, and if we cannot climb it, we build a ladder. If the ladder breaks, we build a rocket. Our bodies may fail, our biology may be weak, but our will is a forge. And in that forge, we shape our own destiny, one tool, one lift, one starship at a time. They laughed at our mechanical bodies. They saw only the surface, the whirring servos, the synthetic skin, the hardpoints and interfaces. They saw replacements for what was lacking. Then they saw us lift the starship. They saw the fusion of mind and metal. They saw the will made manifest in hydraulics. They saw 147 souls network into a single mighty hand, and perform an act of salvation so gentle, so precise, and so finally, so fiercely powerful, that it redefined their understanding of life, of strength, of hope. They learned that humanity does not accept the universe as it is. We engage with it. We wrestle with it. We build prosthetics for our very dreams, and then we use them to move heaven and earth. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story of the willful hand and the hopeful starship moved you, subscribe for more tales of humanity from the stars. We are just getting started.